The road beyond Kandahar unfurls like a scar through dust and silence. By day, it looks harmless. Sandstone ridges, scattered brush, the faint outline of old bunkers baked into the earth. But when night falls, everything changes texture. The ground hardens underfoot and the air begins to hum. Soldiers say the sound isn't wind, it's the land adjusting its weight, remembering who last walked upon it. Every rock, every ripple of sand seems to have seen too much and agreed to stay quiet about it. Patrol logs from decades apart describe the same landscape, word for word. Hills that shift position, roads that appear a few meters left of where they were drawn. It's as if the desert itself is rehearsing its geography, repeating it for someone unseen. Machines break down for no reason. Compasses drift a few degrees west, and yet nothing ever feels hostile, only aware. The stillness carries intent, like the calm between questions that have already been asked. One American officer wrote in his diary that the dust there moved as if it remembered names. Another swore he heard footsteps following his squad at exact intervals, matching pace, matching breath, then fading when they turned around. The hills gave no answers, only silence that felt shaped, deliberate, like something listening back. Out here, memory doesn't fade, it loops. Echoes walk alongside the living, repeating their paths until both become the same. No wonder the men started calling it the Valley of Mirrors. Even their own shadows began to look rehearsed, moving a heartbeat out of sync, as if something underneath was catching up. And within that rhythm, routine patrols. Radio check-ins, the same orders every night. The first fracture began to appear, a pattern so small it could only be noticed by those who had walked the same route too many times. The sense that each step had already been taken. The patrol began like every other. 5 men, same path, same hour, same weary quiet between them. Routine is comfort in a place like this. It builds walls against the unknown. They moved through the dim outskirts of Kandahar, where houses ended and the earth began again, their boots pressing faint patterns into dust already thick with older prints. The radio crackled every few minutes with coded reports, always the same sequence, as if read from a script that never changed. The lieutenant's voice stayed level, clipped by habit. He'd done this route for 3 weeks straight, but lately some of the men spoke less during these walks. One said it felt like déjà vu, every sound, every pause, identical to the night before. Another laughed it off until he realized even the laugh came out at the same point in conversation as last time. A ripple of unease passed through the group, unspoken but shared. The night was moonless, yet shadows lay thick on the ground. Each man's beam of light fell into the same grooves, found the same rocks, caught the same glint of metal from an old shell casing. When they reached checkpoint 3, the wind rose suddenly, a soft, hollow sigh that carried no scent and no dust. Their radios clicked once, all at the same moment, as though acknowledging something. Then silence returned, full and heavy. From above, through drone footage later reviewed, their formation seemed mechanical. 5 dark dots moving in perfect rhythm, pausing and turning at the same times as before. One analyst wrote, "It's as if they practiced it, but no one had told them to. They were simply following orders, repeating what had been done hundreds of times, unaware that even their smallest gestures were aligning with something older." When they returned to base, the reports were routine. No sightings, no contact, nothing unusual. Yet each man hesitated before signing his name on the sheet, as if sensing the act had been done before, somewhere, somehow. That was the first night one of them murmured before sleeping, half joking, half afraid. "We're not patrolling anymore, we're replaying." The order came at dusk, sealed in routine language that stripped away emotion. Patrol Route Delta, standard sweep. 5 personnel. Departure 2140. No urgency, no deviation, just another night filed into repetition. The men geared up silently, their movements slow and synchronized, checking rifles, adjusting straps, exchanging brief nods. One of them hummed softly under his breath, a habit he couldn't remember when he'd started. It blended into the low static of the comms, becoming part of the background noise that defined their nights. Outside, the air was thin and strangely bright. The moon hung low over Kandahar's southern ridge, a pale coin barely cutting through the haze. It gave the desert an unearthly clarity, flattening distance until hills and sky became a single surface. When the convoy halted at the edge of the known road, engines idling, no one spoke. The radio crackled with command confirmations, then fell silent. The hum of power lines overhead sounded like faint breathing. They began their walk, spacing precise, steps measured. Each man's beam traced the dust in front of him, particles swirling like gold flecks in water. The lieutenant's voice, calm and procedural, broke the silence every 10 minutes with position checks. But halfway through the second hour, something shifted. Shadows on the ridgeline moved against the wind. One man caught sight of a figure, no more than a silhouette, standing perfectly still. He called it in, voice steady but lower than usual. The lieutenant responded only with, "Copy, maintain route." As they advanced, the shape vanished. Then another appeared farther ahead. Same posture, same distance, always facing them. The men's breathing turned sharp in their microphones, but no one broke formation. The mission logs later showed nothing abnormal in tone or timing. Only the last entry differed slightly. At 23:12 hours, the final transmission came through. Position secured, moving to point echo. "Do you copy?" Static answered first, a long pull of white noise. Then, faintly, their own voices echoed back. Each word returned seconds late, slightly distorted. "Copy," the lieutenant said again. "Copy!" The signal replied, stretched, almost human. For a moment, no one moved. Then the wind rose, carrying the same word through the desert. "Copy, copy," until it blended with the hum of the landscape itself. By midnight, the channel fell quiet, and it stayed that way. By dawn, the command post knew something was wrong. The patrol's last check-in had come hours earlier, yet their beacon still blinked from the same coordinates. Motionless. The desert was vast, and delays weren't rare, but the lieutenant's team had a reputation for precision. They were the kind of men who never missed a timestamp. So when the second sun report came back negative, the base commander ordered a search team to roll out. The vehicles moved slow through the early haze. Tire tracks appeared and vanished under shifting sand, fading like breath on glass. Radios hissed softly with overlapping voices, each more uncertain than the last. The team reached the coordinates just after sunrise. The landscape there looked normal, almost too normal. A shallow valley framed by low ridges, the kind of terrain every soldier in Kandahar learned to distrust. Then they saw the circle. 5 rifles, standing upright, bayonets fixed in the ground, evenly spaced. Around them lay helmets and packs, arranged neatly, untouched by wind. The sand inside the ring was smooth, undisturbed. No scuffle, no drag marks, nothing to suggest panic or struggle. Yet outside the circle, the surface told a different story. Dozens of footprints overlapping one another, looping and intersecting until direction lost meaning. One soldier whispered that it looked like a dance that never ended. Drones scanned the area. The thermal feed picked up faint heat signatures embedded in the sand, fading slowly as if something had been lying there moments earlier. The air shimmered with static, so faint it could have been the heat, or maybe not. Then came the radio signal. "Copy." The word emerged from nowhere, faint and stretched thin. It repeated twice before dying out. The operator froze. The frequency matched the missing team's encrypted channel, one that should have been offline. He replayed it again, same tone, same cadence. At noon, the search was called off temporarily. The team returned with their report, their faces colourless beneath the dust. That night, when the commander reviewed their body cam footage, he paused at a frame. Barely visible shapes in the distance, low to the ground, aligned in a formation identical to the missing patrol. He watched it twice, then ordered the recording deleted. He was called Daoud, the interpreter assigned to the outpost long before most of the soldiers rotated through. His English carried the soft rhythm of the South, slow and deliberate, like someone who measures words before letting them go. When the investigation began, he was asked about local stories, rumours, old names for the ridges where the patrol had vanished. Daoud hesitated, glancing toward the window where the light turned the dust to gold. "The hills," he said quietly, "they walk sometimes. Not the rock, but what lives inside them." The officers laughed it off, but he continued anyway. His grandfather had fought during the Soviet years, and even then the same whispers existed. Soldiers who disappeared, columns that marched long after being declared dead. He called them the men who walk twice. To see them was never dangerous, he said. It was only a warning, an echo passing through. The danger came when you tried to follow. He described one night when he was a boy, sleeping near the old road. He woke to the sound of boots in sand, steady and synchronized, like a marching band in the distance. When he peered from the tent, he saw lights, dim, flickering, like lanterns moving in rhythm. The figures cast shadows that didn't match their steps. Some stretched ahead, others lagged behind. And then, without a sound, they vanished. The next morning, the path was covered in fresh prints. No village nearby. No travelers expected. Just the same pattern looping around itself, like something practicing a memory. The Americans didn't believe him, not fully, but they noted every word. When asked to guide them to the place, Daoud refused. "It's not the hills that are haunted," he said. "It's the time between footsteps." His eyes stayed on the map, but seemed to look far beyond it. He claimed the desert doesn't bury the past. It repeats it, endlessly, until someone new steps into the same rhythm. That evening, when the team played back their drone's night footage, Daoud stood behind them in silence. On the screen, faint silhouettes appeared in the distance, moving slowly, perfectly aligned. He only nodded once, whispering in Pashto, "They walk again." It started with a noise so soft it almost went unnoticed. A thread of static, buried under the usual hum of base communications. The technicians assumed it was bleed over from another channel, maybe weather interference. But when they isolated the frequency, something strange emerged. Beneath the static, faint syllables began to form, fragmented coordinates, numbers mixed with what sounded like names. The signal would fade, then return at irregular intervals, as if someone were tuning in and out from far away. At first, they dismissed it as coincidence. Kandahar's electromagnetic field was cluttered with abandoned transmitters and old military debris. Yet when the sound engineer replayed the recording through a spectrum filter, he heard something that made his skin tighten. The voice speaking through the static was his own. Same inflection, same slight hesitation before the numbers. The others laughed, uneasy but curious, until one of them recognized a second voice, the lieutenant from the missing patrol. Command ordered the entire sequence analyzed. The timestamps matched the night of the disappearance. No relay stations were active within range. The signal, according to data, had originated from coordinates now marked as uninhabited terrain. Still, the transmission persisted. Each night around the same hour it returned. Always the same pitch, always the same 2 words at the end. Copy received. One night, a young operator decided to respond. He switched to the old patrol's call sign and whispered into the mic, "Identify yourself." For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, through layers of distortion, the reply came back. His own voice, but delayed, echoing through static, like something speaking from inside the line. "Identify yourself." After that, the order came down from higher command. Delete the recordings, shut down the frequency. The logs were sealed and archived, but the engineers who handled the data kept fragments hidden on personal drives. One described a faint sound at the end of every clip. Not speech, not interference. It was rhythmic like breathing, slow, deliberate, too human to be a machine. Daoud, the interpreter, listened once before turning away. "It's not them," he said softly. "It's what remembers them." The first drone footage arrived 2 weeks after the disappearance. It was meant to be routine, night surveillance of the same sector, a slow pan across dunes to confirm nothing had moved. The operator noticed it only on playback. 5 figures walking across the sand, evenly spaced, steady as clockwork. The formation matched the missing patrol exactly. Height, gait, spacing, everything. The timestamp was precise too. 21:40, the same minute they had left the base that final night. The analyst replayed the clip at half speed. The figures weren't heat signatures, yet they weren't shadows either. Their outlines shimmered, blurred slightly at the edges, as if caught between 2 frames. Each step kicked up no dust. Their equipment, faintly visible, looked almost translucent. They moved in silence, perfectly synchronized, then vanished at the same point where the real patrol had stopped transmitting. The camera caught only an empty stretch of desert and the thin hiss of wind against the lens. When the footage was sent for verification, the system logged it as glitched sequence. The program flagged data corruption across multiple frames, pixels rearranging themselves into repeated patterns that looked eerily like marching boots. Engineers dismissed it as compression error until the second drone, launched from a different angle, captured the same event the next night. This time, one of the figures turned its head toward the camera. It was a subtle motion, half a glance, almost human, yet slightly delayed. as though time bent between intention and reaction. The image froze there, blurred by interference. One technician swore the figure's mouth was moving, though the sound feed carried nothing but wind. Another insisted he saw an arm raise in acknowledgement. None of it appeared in the file once archived. By the third week, command restricted drone flights over the area. Pilots were ordered to erase all visual data after review. Still, rumours spread across the base of silent silhouettes caught walking the same path night after night, repeating routes with mechanical precision. Some said the sand had learned their movements and continued without them. Others said the land was playing back its memory, unwilling to let go. No one filed reports anymore. But late at night, from the watchtower, a few men claimed they could still see lights moving along the horizon, slow and steady, tracing the same invisible path through the dark. The desert was quiet that night, so still it seemed to listen. A surveillance team monitored the ridge through an infrared scope, the feed painting the landscape in gradients of red and grey. At 23:10, movement appeared again, 5 heat forms walking the same route, same formation. But this time, one of them lifted an arm, not in signal but in greeting. The operator blinked hard, convinced it was fatigue. Then, through the comms, came a short burst of static, sharp, deliberate, like something trying to shape words from the wind. He switched channels, but the sound followed. It wasn't interference anymore, it was mimicry. Each transmission from the base was repeated seconds later. The same tone, the same cadence, only fainter, as though someone else was speaking from beneath the sand. "Echo test," the technician muttered, tapping the mic. The response came instantly. "Echo test." His own voice, dragged through distance, stretched by static. The men around him froze. Out in the field, patrol cameras recorded something stranger. For 3 seconds, the shapes ahead seemed to ripple, their outlines bending like reflections on moving water. Then one of them stepped forward, separating from the formation. Its shadow extended unnaturally far across the ground, reaching the exact position where the operator's shadow would have fallen under the tower light. The two shapes aligned, one living, one not, and the air filled with a low, rhythmic pulse, as if both had begun to breathe in unison. The radio came alive again, this time with a single phrase. "Do you copy?" The voice was the lieutenant's, clear, unbroken, unmistakable. But his call sign had been retired, his frequency sealed since the night he vanished. The operator didn't answer. The voice came once more, slower now, almost pleading. "Do you copy?" Then came the reply, automatic, involuntary, from the operator's own throat. Copy. He hadn't meant to speak. The others heard it too, through every headset, as though the desert itself had joined the transmission. Moments later, the feed cut out. When it returned, the screen showed only empty sand and the ghostly afterglow of 5 footprints fading in the dark. The official report listed it as an electrical anomaly. Off record, the men said something else entirely. The patrol had answered back. And in Kandahar, when something answers, you stop listening. The report was never meant to be read. Its cover carried no insignia, no classification stamp, just a date and a single word. Incident. Inside, the pages were unevenly redacted, sentences swallowed by black ink that bled through thin paper. What remained told almost nothing, yet suggested everything. Thermal inconsistencies detected, unauthorized signal replication, personnel presumed lost. Between the censored lines, one phrase repeated, phenomenon ongoing. The investigator assigned to compile it was a civilian analyst from Kabul, chosen for his detachment. He approached it as data, not myth. He catalogued the timestamps, audio fragments, and drone logs, trying to build a timeline that refused to hold shape. In his notes, he mentioned that the data behaved strangely, files copying themselves, audio looping where no loop was programmed. When he played one recording backward, he swore he heard breathing, faint but deliberate. He deleted it immediately, then tried to forget. The deeper he went, the more resistance the system seemed to give. Reports vanished from archives, coordinates shifted by decimals, and metadata rewrote itself after shutdown. He began to suspect someone was editing remotely until the terminal disconnected entirely. The next morning, his workstation powered on by itself. The screen displayed a blank document slowly filling line by line with text. His own voice transcription from an earlier interview. Only this time it included a question he never asked. "Do you still hear them?" That was the last entry before he sealed the file. His final note, handwritten and unsigned, read, "They answered, but not in words." Months later, a junior officer reopened the report for transfer. The audio folder was empty, yet when he clicked play, sound emerged. Soft, rhythmic, like someone exhaling between static bursts. It went on for nearly a minute before stopping abruptly, replaced by the faint click of a recorder being turned off. The log closed itself afterward, as if the file had decided to end the session, and for reasons no one could explain, the report's last modified timestamp matched the exact hour the patrol had vanished, 3 years earlier. They found the letter folded neatly inside a weathered field journal, tucked beneath a rusted cot in an abandoned barrack. The envelope had no name, no stamp, only a faint smear where a thumb had pressed too hard. The paper inside was fragile, the ink faded by time and heat, but the words remained clear, steady, careful, written by someone who expected never to send them. "If you get this," it began, "don't come looking." The handwriting belonged to the lieutenant. Each line carried a calm precision, the same tone he used in mission logs. But beneath the orderliness, there was fatigue, the kind that comes from seeing something you can't explain twice. "The land out here," he wrote, "doesn't forget routes. We keep walking them, over and over, like we're stuck inside its memory. Even the wind seems to move in circles." He described how the patrol had started hearing echoes of their own voices during routine checks, sometimes seconds after speaking, sometimes before. When they called base, replies came from nowhere, perfectly timed but not from command. At first, they thought it was a trick of interference. Then they realized the replies were in their own voices, slower, drawn out, as if spoken by someone remembering the conversation rather than living it. The letter continued. "There's a stretch between checkpoint 3 and the ridge where we stop feeling time. We reach it, then it's like walking through our own footprints. The ground feels soft, but when I look back, there's nothing there. I think the desert keeps what it wants, not who it takes." The last lines were short. "If this reaches you, tell them to stop searching. We're not lost. We're just repeating." The journal closed there. No signature, no date. The wind through the barrack that day made the paper tremble, as if the words themselves were breathing. When the investigator archived the letter, he noted one detail he couldn't explain. The ink on the final sentence was still wet. By the time the report stopped, the desert had already begun to reclaim what was left. The wind filled every track, the dunes reshaped themselves, and the hills returned to their slow, patient watching. Only fragments remained: burnt-out batteries, warped metal, a few boots half buried in sand. They were catalogued, tagged, and forgotten, their coordinates sealed under an empty term: unresolved terrain. But locals still spoke of that valley. They said when the heat settles and the wind drops to a whisper, you can hear the soft rhythm of boots moving just beyond sight. 5 at a time, each step landing with perfect precision. Some swore they saw glimmers of light floating low along the horizon, like torches underwater. Others said the sound was only wind passing through old shell holes, yet no one stayed long enough to prove it. Satellite imagery later showed faint lines across the valley floor, curved patterns that didn't match erosion or machinery. They appeared and vanished with the seasons, as though the desert itself was rewriting its surface. Analysts compared them with old patrol routes and found perfect alignment. The ground, it seemed, was remembering. At night, the air over Kandahar holds a particular stillness, neither silence nor sound, but something between. It carries traces of every war that has passed through it: Soviet echoes, British whispers, American static. They blend together until they're indistinguishable. One long exhale that never quite ends. The desert does not bury the past. It plays it back endlessly, like a looped recording too ancient to fade. Those who've walked there speak of a presence that isn't hostile, only attentive, as if the land itself watches and waits, storing every step, every word, every breath. Some describe feeling lighter when they leave, as though something has been taken. A memory, a moment, a piece of sound. Others say they feel heavier, burdened with something unseen. In the end, there is no proof, no closure, only a sense that the story hasn't finished. Somewhere beyond the ridges, when the moon turns thin and white, the patrol still moves. Not ghosts, not men, but impressions left in time, replaying their duty in perfect silence. And perhaps that is what the land keeps. Not bodies, not souls, but motion, the echo of purpose that once crossed it. The war ends, the uniforms change, but the footsteps remain. So when the wind rises across Kandahar and the dust begins to shimmer, it isn't just weather returning. It's memory, quietly, faithfully coming back to life.